What's up guys, this is Michael and this is a bespoke review of the new Alienware QD OLED. This is the F edition, which is the 2022 late model that's replacing the original white edition. They're both QD OLED panels, they're exactly the same panel. The only real difference is they ditched G-Sync for FreeSync, which is the F moniker at the end. And they also got rid of the white colorway, and now you have this sort of a space gray slash dark black aesthetic that I personally like quite a bit more. Now this is going to be a subjective review, so I'm not going to be doing any measurements or anything. Today we're just focusing on what it's like to use this monitor as an end user. So what's this like to game with? What's this like to watch videos with? To browse the internet? And I'm going to go ahead and open up by saying this is a fantastic monitor. It is very expensive and it does appear to be worth its price. Um, some of the aspects of being a QD OLED really shine here, and it puts most other panel technologies to shame, frankly. It's very impressive. If we're going to start out with what we're seeing here, this is HDR 16:9 video. Video looks fantastic here. The colors really pop. The ability for the QD OLED panel to produce a perfect black really makes all the difference when it comes to depth and just the complexity of the scene. You can see here we're starting to see stars and things twinkling in the background. That kind of thing's really not handled well from an LCD, LED models, whatever you're looking at. Even models with local dimming really struggle with things like this, because while they can dim parts of the screen, this particular model can actually turn every one of the individual pixels completely black. So when you're seeing things like this rock here, which has these thin, dark crevices, those can be completely black, which really gives a lot of depth and texture to the scene, which is missing on a lot of LCDs. Now they can get fairly dark at times, but even when they're doing their local dimming, they're dimming larger sections of the screen. So those individual lines can never be truly black. They can just get kind of dark and gray in a lot of scenarios. But here, you're really not getting that. You can have a scene that's, for example, this, which is searing bright when you're looking at lights, but at the same time, you can have the deepest blacks all present at the same time with 1 pixel distance away from each other. And that really makes a big difference. Now, gaming has been quite good on this as well, both SDR and HDR for most of the same reasons. But the biggest difference that you can't see on video, you're just not going to be able to see it, it's more about something you're going to have to feel. And that comes down to the pixel response time. Now, LCD, which is basically dominating the market right now because it's affordable, you have these liquid crystals that physically rotate or they flip to transition between black and white and colors in between. And that takes a second. These organic LED pixels, they're instantaneous. They can turn off or they can turn on completely black to completely white and basically instantaneous. There's really no delay. And because of that, transitions between colors, black and white, and panning, just spinning the camera around very quickly, it looks and feels incredibly smooth. There's no blending of the frames together. There's no smearing or blurring at all. It's just whatever is going to the screen is being displayed. And the difference in that, you can not only see it, it's smooth, it's crisp, even when you're doing quick 180 turns and things are flying across the screen, everything stays pin sharp, especially once you reach that 80 to 90 frames per second range. Things just become so much more natural looking. It's more like you're just watching things go down the road than you're staring at a panel, and that's really impressive. This panel goes up to 165 hertz, if I'm not mistaken. And when you get really high up in that frame rate, things just look so great. Now, when you're comparing this to, say, a VA or an IPS or even a TN panel, which is very fast, even at 165 hertz, this looks so much clearer than the other 240 hertz monitors I have. Even though it's a much lower frame rate, even at 80, 90 frames per second, you can just tell what's happening so much better. And it really makes all the difference when you're just trying to do things quickly, when you're trying to make out small details or spot enemies in the background or shooting down roads and racing games, things like that. It's just a very different experience than what you will see with most other panels on the market. The HDR looks fantastic. You get searingly bright at times. You get pitch black whenever you need it. The HDR is also quite good. These panels come factory calibrated for HDR and SDR. And when you look at things, they come across very natural. Now, this film that you're seeing here is a little exaggerated. They have modified the film to look a little punchier. But when you're watching things that are supposed to look realistic, the colors look realistic. When you're playing things or looking at things that are supposed to be cartoony, they have this huge pop. They have this massive contrast and deep saturation that you're just not going to see otherwise. And it's really impressive. A lot of screens that get really bright like this. This one goes over 1,000 nits, by the way, instantaneously with any of the pixels that you see on the screen. A lot of panels, when they get that bright, the colors kind of distort. They start looking cartoony even when they're not supposed to. That just doesn't happen here. It's very modest when it needs to be, I guess you could say. There's a HDR 400 mode, which goes very dark. There's an HDR 1000 mode, which gets ridiculously bright, and honestly, I can't even use it. There's an HDR game mode, which is what I prefer for gaming because it finds sort of a happy balance. It's not going to burn your eyes out when you're playing games that have a lot of dark and bright scenes at the same time. There's a desktop mode, which is HDR as well, which is better for reading and browsing the internet and things. And all that works really well. One thing I really like about this monitor, here we're watching ultra wide content. I'm going to flip over to a 16:9. And even though we have these black bars on the side, they're completely black. There's no glowing, there's no ghosting, there's no fade over, nothing like that. When you're watching 16:9 content, the black borders just disappear. You don't even notice them. And that makes a big difference when you're watching YouTube on an ultra wide, when you're watching just movies on this thing. I've used other ultra wides and you get this IPS glow around the corner. You can tell the monitor is on. All these black pixels around the side, they're completely off. And that's significant when you're just trying to zone out and really focus on the content. And I do appreciate that. We can go back here. Another thing I wanted to show you is just kind of the menu. It's very simple. You have a joystick on the bottom. Click in and it comes up. You have some direct controls for input, presets, dark stabilizer when available, alien vision, which is just more presets, brightness and contrast. So you have all that, but if you click and then go directly up, you get the full menu, where you have language, transparency, picture-in-picture, picture-by-picture. You have your aspect ratio, so for example, if the game's not cooperating, that's a 16:9 only game. On this 21:9, you can put it in 16:9 and alleviate a lot of glitches and just screen distortion that you might have to deal with otherwise. You have backlight lighting that you can adjust, push your inputs, brightness and contrast, and these are some of your presets. Here you have your various HDR modes. And that's really about it. It's a simple menu, but it does get the job done. There are a couple concerns with the monitor that I've ran into. One, most of the HDR and SDR games work and look absolutely fine. Deep Rock Galactic is one that I play a lot that has some weird bug that when you turn on HDR, I can't tell if it's the game or it's the monitor, but I have had at least one other user that has this exact same monitor that had this same issue crop up immediately when they switched to this, which is exactly what happened to me. Basically, the HDR doesn't map correctly. It comes out quite broken. And I'm not sure what's going on there, how to fix it. There may not be a fix. You can see the game starts out looking great. This is actually SDR. Perfect blacks, deep rich whites. And it's not going to come across on the screen, but when you move things around and you just play, it looks really good. I have kind of a low-end GPU in here, so it's not maximum settings. You can see just how punchy and things this is, just in SDR. This SDR image looks as good as a lot of HDR screens that I've used, especially if you're HDR 400 or 600. This SDR image kind of puts a lot of those to shame. Now you can go up here and go into the graphics, and I can show you this bug. Hopefully it's not going to affect anything else, but this is what ends up happening. It's almost like something's just not mapping right. I reached out to Alienware, they've not said anything. I reached out to Deep Rock Galactic, they've not said anything, so we're still kind of working on that. But that is cropping up. There are firmware updates available on this panel, so if bugs do occur, hopefully they can get rid of them. There is a fan in this monitor. You would never know it. I've not been able to hear it yet. The older white version had two fans, one for G-Sync, one for the panel. The G-Sync module you could hear, but just the panel fan in this one, completely oblivious to it. I wouldn't know about it if they wouldn't tell you. A couple other little details to keep in mind. This is a 10-bit panel. It has an 8-bit mode, but the 10-bit range for some reason ends at 100 Hertz. Now that's not a big deal. If you set it at 165, you still have 8-bit. And the 8-bit, to me, for the most part, is absolutely indistinguishable. This panel does something with the blending of the colors to where you really can't tell the difference between 8-bit and 10. I'm not seeing color banding. I'm not seeing any of those sort of issues, no blocking, nothing like that. So I've not had to worry about it. But overall, absolutely fantastic monitor. It does have burn-in protection, a 3-year burn-in warranty. You have pixel shift, so if you ever look at one of these, the screen may slowly walk one way or the other as it's shifting the pixels around to prevent static images such as this from staying on screen the whole time. It can detect items that are on the screen for a while and it'll actually start dimming those down. If the screen starts getting too hot, it will dim the brightness down. All that just to protect and maintain those QD OLEDs. And hopefully this is going to last for quite a while. Very impressed with the monitor. I have no real complaints other than that one bug. Yeah, that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm going to be doing some more testing with this. I have a Cooler Master Mini LED that does a pretty good job of competing with this a lot of times in all scenes except dark scenes like stars and when you have a black background with white text. Things like that it will struggle with. But a lot of times you can put them side by side and they look very competitive. It's about half the price. So I want to do some more content on that. I want to talk to you about that, get some info out there. If you have any questions on how this compares, whether or not you should get it, feel free to reach out. Again, this is Mike, and look forward to hearing from you soon.